Hey everybody, my name is Stephen Feuerstein, and I am totally obsessed with removing plant invasives as one of the best ways humans can actually contribute to healing our suffering planet and making the world better for everybody and everything. What I want to talk to you about today is how to efficiently and safely take down trees and shrubs and vines using hand saws. Hand saws is definitely one of the most common tools that we'll be using, and there are an awful lot of nuances on how to do it best. So, the first thing, in terms of sawing and anything else having to do with being out in the world, out in nature, is being safe and preparing. So, what I'm going to do is put on my protective eyewear, because you got to protect your eyes, especially when you're dealing with trees with branches that might brush against your eyes and damage them. I'm going to make sure I'm wearing good quality gloves. Try to find some good leather gloves. I love the Hydra Hide gloves from Wells Lamont. Best price at Costco. Okay, so I've got gloves, I've got glasses, I've got long sleeve shirt, I've got long pants, I've got good boots. Don't go into the woods in shorts. Definitely never open toe shoes. Cover your skin as much as possible. Put on your bug spray, whatever else you need to do. Okay, so we're going to be doing sawing, which means I'm going to be using a saw. I'm going to be using something called a Silky Sugoi 360 millimeter saw blade. And the key thing, you want to basically make it easily available to you. So ideally when you're going out, you should wear a belt. So you can attach the saw to your belt, or in this case, I'm going to actually put it on my leg, because that makes me feel super cool. Then before you get started, also check your saw, check your tools, make sure they're safe, they're tight. So for example, this has a dial, so I'm just going to make sure it's nice and tight. Lesser expensive saws have individual bolts or screws. You want to make sure they're tight. Make sure the blade is clear and clean and looks pretty sharp. Just make sure when you buy a saw, if you're going to buy one that you can replace the blades on, so you're not just using it once and throwing it away. And I think pretty much all the saws you'll buy today are replaceable. Okay, so my saw looks to be in good shape. I put it where I don't have to hold it. And so what we're going to do is take down a Chinese privet, and I'll go through some of the basic tips around sawing, and then we'll explore nuances of it in various ways. So this is called Chinese privet. It's one of the worst invasives in our area here in North Carolina. Small green oval leaves. So this is, I would say, a medium-sized privet. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of clear my way. I'm going to get in here. Okay. So now let's talk about some basic tips on how to saw. What most people find is that if they follow the tips I'm about to give you, they will be able to work much more quickly with a lot more satisfaction. So, okay, so now let's work on cutting down a kind of medium-sized privet. In general, what you want to do when you're looking at cutting down trees is you want to take a look up. First of all, verify that it's a tree you want to cut. So you want to make sure, usually by looking up at the leaves on your tree, that is what you want to cut. So I look up, they're small green leaves, they're opposite, not alternate. I can see the berries on them. This is a Chinese privet. Okay, the next thing is to figure out how it's going to fall. If you're cutting something very small, you can control how it will fall. But when you're cutting something bigger, and this is probably right on the limit of when you can make a difference of it, when you're cutting something bigger, it's going to fall where it's going to fall, where it wants to fall, especially if it's full of leaves, because the leaves make it very heavy and top heavy. So I'm going to look at this tree, and I can see that it's leaning out towards the creek. So I'm going to figure that it's going to fall towards the creek. So first of all, let's talk about where I should saw. In general, with the cut stump method, you want to saw as close down to the ground as you can. In addition, you have to figure out which side to saw on. Where do I start? So first tip is, if it's leaning this way, if it's going to fall this way, you don't want to saw on the side it's leaning into. You want to saw on the side away from the lean. So this is not much of a lean, but it's enough to see that's the way it's going to go. If I'm cutting this way, the tree is leaning this way, it's going to press into the blade, and that's called binding. I won't be able to move the blade. It'll get stuck. But the main thing is you avoid binding in part by cutting on the correct side. If I cut on this side, the gravity will push the tree into my blade, if I cut on this side, as I'm cutting, gravity will pull the tree down and over away from my blade, making it a lot easier to do a clean, fast cut. So I'm going to cut on this side. Probably one of the most important things for people is that usually when newcomers or newbies start sawing, they go like this. So they work really, really hard, and they probably feel good doing it. They end up going back and forth like this, dulling out the middle part of the blade. This stays sharp, this goes dull. The blade becomes fairly useless for most people, and it ruins a good blade. You have to replace it sooner or try to sharpen it sooner. So one of the first tips to remember is that what you want to do is go nice and slow and use the full blade. So you don't get up close and do this. You get far enough away to get a full extension, and you just pull the blade through. I'm barely putting any pressure on it. In fact, what I usually do is put one hand on the handle, I put another hand over it, and I'm not pushing, I'm just holding it there. And that's enough. Just and down it goes. So I barely made any effort. I let the saw do the work. If I go super fast, I'll get there as well, but I'm going to do a lot more work, and ironically, it might take more time or more effort, because if you go too fast, you're not giving the teeth of the saw a chance to dig in and do the sawing work. So you take your time. Now in this case, I cut pretty high, because that's where I just started showing the demonstration. You might do that if you got a really big tree to cut off some of the bigger upper limbs. In this case, what I'm going to do is finish things off. I'm going to come down here now. So now we'll put those tips to work. I'm going to get far enough away, do a full extension, and then pull the blade, full blade through. What I'm also going to do is get down low. So a couple of other tips. A lot of people will say, I'm going to saw this tree down here, and they'll go from up here. At least two things happen. One is that you end up cutting at an angle. And as I like to remind my university and high school students who work with me, this is an example of where you can apply what you learned in math class. So if I'm cutting at an angle, think about a triangle, a right angle triangle. The hypotenuse is the longest line of the three sides of the triangle. If I cut it, the more I cut at an angle, the longer my cut. The longer the cut, the more work you're doing. So what you want to do is get as perpendicular to the trunk direction as possible. That would be more like this. Now the other thing though is that you can go perpendicular, but if you're up here, then as you pull the blade, you're going to pull up. You're going to go like this. That's going to cause the blade to bind because it's bending in that flat lane you created in the tree, and it's a lot harder to cut that way. So what I always do is get down low.
It's also not good for your back.
And it's not good for your back too, right? So what I do is get down low, and then I'm pulling horizontally. If you play billiards, if you play pool, then you know that the best way to have a good consistent shot is you keep your shoulder stable and you're just moving your arm back and forth. So you've got stability of your motion. Same thing here. I want to be able to pull back and forth, but I'm not going up and down. And then you get a nice, clean, efficient cut. The other thing is where you put your body. So a lot of times I'll see people do something like this. So I'm going to cut on this side to make it fall that way. I'm going to stand behind the blade and I'm doing this. It's a very awkward and inefficient way to do a cut because you're pulling backwards away from the tree as you're sawing, or you're awkwardly pushing forward. So what you want to do generally, I find, is to position your body sort of on the side towards which you're cutting. So if I'm cutting here, I want my body to be at least even with the tree in past, not back behind. And then as I cut, again, nice and slow, nice easy strokes, and down it goes. And I've taken down this privet. Hopefully you can see that with a good saw and with good technique, it doesn't take a lot of energy, it doesn't take a lot of strength to bring down even sizable trees.